This presentation is about the movie theaters of East Liverpool. It was originally created in the 1980s by me, Susan Weaver, as part of Retrospect, the Museum of Ceramics Film Festival. The slides have now been converted to PowerPoint and the script has been modified. While not meaning to be an in-depth historical survey, I hope you will enjoy this brief look back in time at one of East Liverpool's favorite pastimes, going to the movies. First, I want to talk a little bit about Nickelodeons. The Nickelodeon was the first type of indoor exhibition space dedicated to the showing of projected motion pictures. Usually set up in a converted storefront, these small, simple theaters charged 5 cents for admission and flourished from about 1905 to 1915. To give an example of their popularity, in 1907 there were 500 in the United States. But by 1910, this number had increased to 10,000 Nickelodeons, and 6 of them were in East Liverpool. They had wonderful names such as McClintock's Electric Theater, The Gavity, Arcadia, and Dreamland. And you will see how these Nickelodeons were the forerunners of many of our theaters. I should also note that this photo is not of East Liverpool Nickelodeons. The size and grandeur of the theaters reflected the passion and love for the stage, and by the 1920s, for the movies. The Ceramic Theater is a prime example of one of these cathedrals of the cinema, as some have called them. Boasting of the second largest stage in Ohio, it opened on November 21st, 1904, with a comic opera called Wang, starring DeWolf Hopper and a cast of 70. This grand lady was built at the cost of $150,000. Upon its opening, the Evening Review reported, the house was filled with East Liverpool select set, and there was a standard of society that was pleasing to note. The theater could seat 1,504, 512 of these on the main floor. The walls were Empire red and the seats were leather. Draperies were purchased from D.M. Ogilvy, and the Wilton green carpet came from Frank Crooks. On several occasions during World War II, the balconies, known as Peanut Heaven, were overflowing with children who received free admission to a matinee in exchange for a piece of scrap metal. It was reported that 1,700 kids attended, far more than the seating capacity of this theater. 12 boxes arrayed along the sides could seat an additional 56 guests. Here is a view of those boxes at a different time period than the previous slide and with a different decor. A pit orchestra made up of local musicians provided the music for performances and later for the silent films. Early improvements to the ceramic included a lighted ceramic sign and a porch. To begin showing movies, the ceramic purchased a glass screen in 1912. It was one of 8 made, and it was the largest of the 8. It took 4 horses and a newly made sled, 8 foot by 20 foot, to haul the screen from the railroad car to the theater. Workers tore out a part of the back brick wall to get it inside. 2 weeks after installing the motion picture screen, an electric sign was mounted on the roof of the Surprise Clothing House on the Diamond. One of the largest signs in the city, it had 310 lights. Letters would show picture or show to announce the current offering at the theater. One of those early pictures was Phantom of the Opera. Made in 1925, it made its way to East Liverpool in 1929. This production, starring Lon Chaney, was made up of 10 reels containing 9,200 feet of film. The ceramic had to secure a $2,000 insurance policy in order to lease it. The policy was to protect it from rain, snow, and blizzards. Another famous movie, Gone with the Wind, was made in 1939, won 8 Academy Awards, and perhaps is the best known of all American movies. Moviegoers all over the nation flocked to see this epic film, and East Liverpool, they came to the ceramic to see it. And since East Liverpool is the pottery capital of the nation, it's only fitting that a theater called the Ceramic have Chinaware matinees. This advertisement entices ladies to attend on Mondays to get a free piece of pottery. This is the Presbyterian church that stood on the corner of Market and Fifth, where the Fox's Pizza Den is currently located. In 1907, Pastor James Taggart said this in his sermon to the congregation. Our sadness is turned to humiliation as we think of the uses that shall be made of this audience room, where we have so often joined in the worship of the Holy One. When we think that this house shall be devoted to that which in many ways will teach lessons directly contrary to those which have been inculcated, we are grieved and hardly wish it might be otherwise. Workmen quickly removed the steeple and the interior reminders that this had been a church and installed a 14-foot by 22-foot stage on the second floor along with the dressing room, and the Bijou Theater was born. The word bijou, meaning jewel, was one of the most common names for theaters at the time. Soon after, the name was changed to the Diamond Theater. Like the Ceramic, it began as a stage theater, primarily for vaudeville. But just to be clear, their ads stated, "Our house will be a theater for mothers and daughters, sisters and sweethearts, where purity of their thoughts will be conserved above all other things." In February of 1908, representatives from the Diamond Theater appeared before the city's mayor to ask permission to show movies on Sundays. They offered to donate 50% of the proceeds to any charitable institution in the city and vowed to show only movies approved by the Ministerial Association. The mayor emphatically denied the request. No show on Sunday was his verdict. While the Ceramic collected scrap for the war effort in the 40s, the Diamond helped the Salvation Army during the 1916 holiday season by charging 2 potatoes as admission for a 10 a.m. performance. Throughout its existence, the Diamond Theater was presenting vaudeville as well as movies. Here's an ad for Chaplin's 1917 film, Easy Street. These early films were about 10 minutes in length, and this was no coincidence. In the early years, theater owners underestimated the coming success of motion pictures. Many thought it was a novelty to be tolerated until people got tired and wanted only stage performances again. Vaudeville acts were generally 10 minutes long, so a theater like the Diamond would present 5 vaudeville acts and a chaser. These short movies were called chasers because they ran the people out for the second seating. The Diamond Theater closed in the 1920s. The American theater has had its start as the Arcadia Nickelodeon. Lemuel Heron raised a capital of $75,000, of which $42,000 was his own money, and expanded the Nickelodeon into the American Theater. It opened 2 days after Christmas on 1909. It could seat 1,200 people, and it boasted a stage that was 32 feet long. The American, like the others, was designed for plays, performances, and vaudeville. Movies were just a sideline. Performances such as Lottie Mayer Diving Queen in 1912 were scheduled. In between shows, local amateurs competed in a diving contest. In this photo, the American is decked out for the Lincoln Highway Parade in 1915. Even without all the bunting, the American is decorated with 1,145 lights, 250 of them in the flag on the top. The brick exterior is trimmed with limestone and terracotta, and inside it is decorated in Louis XIV style with Turkish red as the main color and accents of sky blue and canary yellow. Above the stage is a skylight, 1/6 the size of the stage, and it is to open in case of fire, while at the same time an asbestos fire curtain is lowered. This is an ad for a silent film by Harry Langdon. Notice it says he used to perform with only 2 reels of film. In other words, that's the chaser we spoke of. But now full-length movies are coming into vogue, even if they are still silent. In 1928, though, the American gets the Vitaphone to allow for talkies and shows Rinty of the Desert as its first sound picture. Another thing to note in this ad is that it states the home of Better Pictures, which may be a slam to the Columbia across the street. On May 25th, 1950, 75 people were inside watching a new movie, Outcast from Black Mesa, starring Charles Starrett and Smiley Burnette, when a fire broke out. A reporter from The View wrote, "Patrons knew the smoke was not from the Six Guns." Five local fire departments, totaling 100 firemen, responded to the call. Historians believe it was one of the most spectacular fires the city has ever seen. The loss was estimated at $200,000, including $50,000 that had been spent the previous year on remodeling the marquee, putting down new carpeting, and seats. The management announced immediately they would rebuild. The New American was much smaller, seating only 560. Yet downsizing may have been a contributing factor in its longevity, as it was the last of East Liverpool's theaters to close. The Columbia Theater was directly across from the American Theater on 6th Street. You can spot the Columbia's marquee on the left on this screen, and the American's is on the right. This photo was taken to document the removal of the streetcar lines. The Columbia has the distinction of being the only East Liverpool true movie theater. It began as a Nickelodeon called McClintock's Electric Theater and was expanded into a movie theater around 1912. The Columbia was also the smallest of East Liverpool's theater, with a seating capacity of 420. The local paper had this to report: that moving pictures are no longer a craze, but a popular pastime with local folks, is best demonstrated by the steady attendance at this new and modernly constructed motion picture theater. But the local paper also had this to say during Columbia's first year. According to the testimony of the local truant officer, the motion picture shows are causing more delinquency among school children than almost any other agency. The official had visited a number of theaters during the matinee performances recently and located children whose whereabouts were unknown to their parents and teachers in some instances, and in other instances where parents were openly and flagrantly contributing to this sort of delinquency by accompanying their children to the playhouse. The Columbia in later years was known for showing B-grade westerns, earning it the title of the Hoopy Palace. In the late 60s, it ran adult-only movies and boasted, "These pictures will never be shown on television." This photo depicts the McKinley Theater in 1914. It too had been a Nickelodeon, the Dreamland, in its infancy. It opened with 5 vaudeville acts and a chaser. Oh, oops, I mean a movie. Sophie Finds a Hero. The newspaper said it's bright and sparkling clean, perfectly ventilated, and thoroughly comfortable. A year later, the McKinley became the Strand. Another popular name for theaters, it is thought that the name was derived from Strand Street in London, where many elegant theaters were located. The Strand had a new coat of paint and a full orchestra to accompany the performance. They also bought a Smith's Orchestra pipe organ from New York, making it the largest organ in the city. In 1928, the Strand closed for remodeling and then reopened as the State Theater. Extensive remodeling at the cost of $100,000 resulted in a pale blue and gold interior. There were dark green leather and mahogany seats. It could seat 500. And as you can see by the poster, they added the Vitaphone so they can present talkies. It is interesting that they claimed to be absolutely fireproof, yet bragged of 10 exits and 4 fire escapes that could empty the theater in 2 minutes. And here's another photo, just because. but it also shows, again, the taking up of the streetcar lines. And yet one more photograph. Long before Judy Garland, Barbra Streisand, or Lady Gaga, Janet Gaynor starred in A Star is Born and won the first Academy Award for Best Actress. This is just one of the classic films that East Liverpool moviegoers saw at the State. Did you happen to see MASH here? If you did, then you saw the last running film before it closed in 1971. The American Theater remained open the longest. I need to do a little more research and find out the actual closing date. The Columbia had closed for the summer in 1967, never to reopen. Quickie Meat Market took over the building and even used the marquee. So what is happening here? By the 1950s, television was holding audiences captive in their living rooms, and theaters all over the nation were closing. In 1950, there were 98 commercial VHF stations, television stations, in the U.S., and by 1960, that number had more than quadrupled. Between 1950 and 1959, there were 5 million TV sets sold each year. If you owned a TV, you went to 30 less movies in a year. Changes in living patterns, suburbanation, changes in leisure activities, sports, and more convenient travel modes all affected the film attendance. And the theaters that did survive longer than the American were put out of business by huge multiplex cinemas. Perhaps the saddest closing, though, was that of the Ceramic Theater. This grand lady had performers such as Ethel Barrymore, who starred in the 1935 The Constant Wife, the last of the large stage shows to be shown here. Blackstone the Magician performed here. Will Rogers was on stage in 1925, and seats cost $1.10 or $3.10. And a young Helen Hayes was on stage in 1917. Many residents received their diplomas from the stage of the Ceramic Theater. But no one can trump Mrs. Myrtle Taylor's experience at the Ceramic. In 1942, she went into labor while watching a movie and gave birth to twins. The newspaper headline the next day said, "Double feature at the Ceramic." The Ceramic closed in 1959 and was bought by the city in 1961 for $45,000. It was raised for a parking lot. But it's best to remember the Ceramic for all the joy it gave to East Liverpool citizens. It, like the other theaters, lives on in our memories.